For nearly 3 years, Nate and I have released podcast episodes week after week after week. And while the podcast has helped thousands of owners, we want to go a level deeper and offer a greater level of support to our listeners. Our goal has always been to help you escape the trap that befalls most music school owners, namely that owners who decide to scale their music business often make less income than they did when they were teaching alone. And unfortunately, they often spend more time on their business to generate that smaller return. Nate, why do you think that is?
I know why that is, Daniel, because we experienced this when we began Brooklyn Music Factory 15 years ago. They're just huge mistakes that we both made when scaling up. Even with all of the information available to our industry, so many owners that you and I personally have coached are making those mistakes too.
And that can lead to all kinds of problems when trying to scale a music school.
Like?
Well, how much time do you have? We've done about 120 or 130 episodes on this. Things like low retention, difficulty in finding committed teachers, frequent staff turnover, low or no margins, a feeling of constant overwhelm, confusion about what actions to take on a day-by-day basis, focused, ineffective marketing, long hours and still not enough time to get everything done, or returns, no cash during the summer. I could just go on and on, Nate.
Yeah, I know you could. That list hurts, but I have great news. Something big is coming, Daniel, because on November 1st of this year, we are going to launch the Founders Forum. So if you suffer from some, most, or all of those problems that Daniel just listed, then we got great news for you, because we are inviting you to join a committed, high-energy group of school owners. You're going to have access to the playbooks and processes that have helped Brooklyn Music Factory grow to 7 figures. The combined wisdom of a coaching team that has decades worth of experience in helping school owners grow. School owners just like you. Support from Daniel and myself while you implement profit-exploding changes in your school. And an insider's look at other schools in our industry. You're going to have access to the pooled knowledge of a group of owners that are going all in on growing their school.
We're going to be releasing more information about this opportunity over the coming months in advance of that November 1st launch date. And if you'd like to be the first in line to join the forum, or you'd just like more information, head over to growyourmusicstudio.com/forum, and let's make this year your best year yet. Again, head over to growyourmusicstudio.com/forum. And if you're listening to this in the future, you can join the second wave of owners by applying at that link. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Daniel and Nate here, once again showing you how to build a music academy or studio that is fun and profitable to run. As usual, we've got a good episode for you today. This time it came from a conversation that Nate and I were having recently. I don't know when it was, Nate, but it turns out I said something to you that sparked a whole bunch of questions. He just started grilling me about one particular thing I said. And Nate, I think I'll just turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, I love these eps, Daniel, because I feel oftentimes like I'm being interviewed, and this is one of those flips. I've got a whole pile of questions for you around one of our favorite topics, which is hiring. So like 3 months ago, you were in a hiring phase at Grow, and you were bringing on a new admin role. And you had found someone, and you mentioned you found someone great. And to me, it sounded like all systems were go. And so about a month after this hire happened, I followed up and was like, hey, how's it going with your new hire? And you said, sort of almost offhanded, you said, oh, that recent new admin hire didn't pass the 21-day test. And they're no longer working at Grow. And I was
Right.
I was like, wait, the 21-day test. What are we talking about? So I thought, I quickly jotted down in our Evernote, we need to do an episode on the 21-day test, because I think that this is the kind of thing that, first of all, we don't have a 21-day test as part of our hiring funnel at BMF. And I was really intrigued because I think we have a pretty robust hiring funnel at Brooklyn Music Factory. And number two, I was like, we hear from so many of our listeners about how important getting that right studio manager or that right administrative support role is for their school, and that they really need it. And so I was like, this is definitely going to be valuable to our listeners. So what do you say? You want to dive in and into the 21-day test?
Yeah. Before we do that, though, before you start peppering me with questions, I mean, I already have a few things to say. First
Okay.
off, um, we have hired a total of 3 new people over the last 90 days as either for grouplessons.com or Grow. 2 out of the 3 survived. The one that didn't was the one that I was speaking to you about. That's the first thing. Second thing, we have categorized every episode around topics, and we made a special post with this downloadable resource where you can sort by topic. So if you're on a hiring kick, you can very easily use this tool to see every episode we've done on hiring. There's direct links to the episodes, so you don't have to go hunting around for it, like that sort of thing. If you want everything we've done on marketing, everything we've done on management, everything we've done on you as an executive, all of our Q&A episodes, our 5 for 5 episodes, there's something like 12 categories where I went through and like, what's this one about? And I found basically 12 categories. So very helpful tool. So go check that out. That'll be in the show notes here. You can go to growyourmusicstudio.com, just go to the blog and find the podcast. And you should be able to find that fairly easily.
Okay, but hold on, because I think that resource the resource you just described to me is like 10x more valuable than what listeners might first kind of ascertain from it. And the reason why is because we live in this age now where there is so much like infotainment. There's just piles of content that are being, we're being bombarded with all the time. And what I love about the latest resource that we did for the pod was we said, no, you don't need to just listen to everything. Focus on what your priority is for the year. Go to that resource and focus on those 7 F's. Because I'm curious, like, how many do we even have on hiring?
Well, let me pull that up.
Yeah, pull that up and tell us. Because, like, let's say your priority is, in fact, building team this year. That's one of your annual priorities. Then I'd say go straight to that tab and focus on those episodes. I'm going to just guess, Daniel, but I bet you there's 10, maybe more.
Hold on. I got to find it here in my history. My goodness.
How many do we have in hiring?
We only, according to this, including this episode, we only have 4.
Stop it.
But here's the deal. Here's the deal, though. There are some episodes where we might have talked about it, but maybe that episode could have fallen into 2 categories. So, for instance, I know for a fact we have one about what to pay your teachers, and we did talk a lot about hiring in that episode, but we categorize it under financial.
Yeah, financial fluency. Well,
yeah.
Okay, so can I just make the argument then, if there are only 4 episodes on hiring and hiring is one of your priorities, then it's a no-brainer to grab this resource and focus on those 4 eps, because anybody can get through 4 episodes of 7FMS.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. And so just, categories, client policies, opening commercial location, company culture, company policies, education/product, executive, financial, group lessons, growth, hiring, legal, live Q&A, management, marketing, operations, retention, sales, strategy, summer camp, teachers, and team. And so underneath the teachers category, there's actually a lot of hiring stuff as well.
Nice.
Yeah. So, it's baked in there somewhat. There's some good advice in there, but those are the categories we have right now. And if we end up doing a different category or we add something later, we'll just update this resource.
So one more time, Daniel, if I wanted to find that resource and I'm listening right now, what's the easiest way to access that?
Yeah, I would just say we're going to be putting it as a resource in the show notes on every blog post for the podcast from now on. So if you just go over to growyourmusicstudio.com, go to the blog and find the latest podcast episode, you'll find it in the show notes. But we probably should have it like in a much easier, just like on its own download page. So Bethany, make that happen. Like consider this.
Team.
Don't even cut this out. Like just this is you officially getting that assignment.
Okay. So, and Bethany, of course, is someone who's gone well past the 21-day test.
Yeah.
So
She's like on the 1200th day or something.
the 1200th day test.
1500th. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start with an easy one right out of the gate.
Okay.
Can you just define what exactly is the 21-day test?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I go through a typical hiring process, creating the role, creating the job description, getting it all written out, thinking of it as a marketing lens, or thinking through it from a marketing standpoint, looking at it through the lens of marketing, posting it, finding people, screening people, having initial conversations, then a more exhaustive interview, making a hiring decision. All right. So all that's already happened. In the process of having the more intense discussions with them, like, so in other words, someone is a finalist, we will tell them, hey, if we say yes to you, we aren't even necessarily committing to you. For the first 21 days, we will pay you and we're going to give you work to do. But it's basically a probationary period.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we give them the reasoning as to why. And I'll go ahead and give that reasoning now. Like, what is the purpose of this? Why do we do this? And I don't think it would be inappropriate to like talk about that right here and now, even though there's other aspects of what this is that I haven't talked about yet. But essentially, we're trying to guard against someone who interviews really well. We're wanting time to see how they fit within the team. I'm wanting time to see how they communicate. The way, another way of looking at it would be that you might go on a first date with someone and have like incredible chemistry with them, but it doesn't mean that they're good marriage material. Right. And so this is a way for us to date a little bit longer, as it were, before we get married, and so twice in the last 6 years, someone has failed that 21-day test and we didn't end up working with them long term. The most recent one was this spring. Another one was late 2010s. I think it was like 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. And in both cases, it was just a situation where as we worked longer, it became very evident that long term, this wouldn't be a good deal for either of us.
I'm struck, Daniel, by this idea that like everyone benefits by sort of like deciding early on that this isn't a mutually beneficial relationship. You know what I mean? Like the longer you go with it, the harder it is to get out of the relationship.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious, it kind of leads me to my next question is, the first one is kind of just an easy one, which is 21 days some kind of perfect number for some reason, or is it just a convenient one, or is 7 your lucky number, so you do that times 3?
It's 3.
Sure. Why 21 days?
Yeah. So I say 21 days because it's 3 weeks. It's 3 working weeks. And I originally picked this idea up from a coach that I hired specifically around scaling and hiring. So as I've said often on the podcast, if you want to get good at something fast, if you want to get good at something, educate yourself on it. If you want to get good at something fast, educate yourself on it and then hire a coach to coach you on it as well.
Right.
Because you're just going to speed up faster. It's the same thing. Someone can go to YouTube and learn piano or guitar or drums. But if you want to really get good, when you have that kind of professional feedback, you're going to accelerate faster. It's why I don't understand when people say, "Oh, hiring a coach, that's a scam." You're literally a coach. You're a music teacher. It's literally what you do. And I see in some of the music academy owner Facebook groups, like people like, "Yeah, that's a scam. Buying an online course is a scam," or hiring a coach is a scam. It's just nonsense. It's literally what our job is.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Wait, hold on. I just want to highlight what you just said, because what's hilarious is sometimes I'll be like back in a practicing phase of my life on piano, and I'll be like, I really should get a teacher right now to accelerate
Mm.
whatever the goal is. And even, I mean, and I'm about to turn 55, have been playing piano for most of my life. And even in that instance, I'll somehow talk myself out of in the
Out of
moment.
it?
Yeah, like, and I'm like, this is ridiculous, dude. You've had like some of the
Yeah.
most profound relationships you've had have been with piano teachers and coaches in your life.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, just pausing back to you. So 3
Oh, no
weeks,
worry.
you learned it from someone. What that, because that was my next question, is where did the idea even come from?
Right. So basically, in 2017, I had flirted with team the previous couple years, like role players. I never really had a successful hire that really took a lot of weight and pressure off of me. It was always like little
Right.
odd jobs or little, VAs that I hired overseas to like do things, and they did it like really poorly and slow and stuff like that. And
Yep.
so I just was at a place where I was so overwhelmed with Grow Your Music Studio and the amount of success we had so fast that I knew I was losing opportunity because I didn't have a team around me.
Yes.
And so I hired this coach, and it was so transformative. And one of the principles he taught me was this. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And then I've just used it ever since then. I will also just throw this in as well. Admittedly, this does work better when the role is a little bit looser, when it isn't as defined. I tend to be, because hiring and team is not as much an area of strength as other areas in business for me. I think I am a little bit more disorganized here. And so I have tended, at least on the team side, to like develop roles very messily and organically, simply because there's a lack of skill there on my part. And so it is easier to do this when you have with generalists or someone who isn't coming in at like, a much higher level role, like a management role. I don't know if I recommend this for a management role. You might need to have them on probation for longer, to be honest. And I do know some companies that do it that way, like, big companies like in Silicon Valley and things of that nature, where there is like this period where they're evaluating.
Well, it occurs to me just like, because we've hired, I think, almost every type of role a music school hires at Brooklyn Music Factory. I feel like our listeners can take this episode and say, hey, I want to apply this to a role like the person you're bringing in to work the desk, your administrative support, maybe an enrollment or an enrollment specialist, that kind of thing. I wouldn't necessarily apply this, for example, to a new teacher, even though we have at BMF, we have a sort of a semester-long trial period with our teachers where they go through all the training and the onboarding, and there's actually like a $5 bump in their pay from when they start to closing out the first semester. And that's more like a reward for having made it through all the training and established, sort of put your feet squarely on the ground. But I like your last point there, Daniel. It's like, hey, let's focus on roles where this really applies so that we don't get sort of overwhelmed by all the information you're about to share too. So let's get into the weeds on this a little bit. They've got 21 days. That's 3 working weeks. Can you describe sort of how it works? Like maybe there's value in saying what week 1 versus week 2 versus week 3 looks like, and how you're actually sort of assessing as you move through it.
And I think it would be helpful to talk about this in the context of the 2 times where we actually activated this, and it kind of it becomes less conceptual, like where we those 2 instances where someone didn't survive the test. Basically, prior to hiring someone, we will already have identified a number of processes, systems that this person will be taking over or originating. Like, we already have a strong sense of what the job will entail, right? And so they come on board, and during their first week, they're really doing our onboarding. So we're literally just paying them to be trained on that first week.
Totally.
And while they're doing that, we might have some very simple things that they do, but some of our more robust tasks we wouldn't give them necessarily right away. So first week, we're just seeing, are they following the basic assignment of, doing the onboarding correctly? There's a number of things that they owe us according to the onboarding training. So like when they complete this training, send this to Daniel, send this to Bethany, set this account up. Like if there's, and this wouldn't happen, but hypothetically, like if they're struggling to figure out how to log into their email, like that's a red flag, like, okay.
We have simple ones like, I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you can be really specific with an example from your week 1 training and just onboarding, because like at the factory, we have basic ones like create your Slack account, say hello to the following people in different roles. So then they have to like kind of go find those Slack channels and say hi to Leah in payroll, say hi to Jessica over here, that kind of thing. I wonder if you could share one or two of those.
Yeah. So I can't really zoom in here, but this is like part of our training, just called team onboarding. And so the very first one here is read our SOP requirements. So this is our training on how to write SOPs in our business. And it's very detailed. And then they finish that. More than likely, we will have assigned them to write an SOP, a very simple one. It might even be one we already have, but we give them a video that says, hey, this is what you need to write. And then they write an SOP for us. And then I or Bethany will look it over and see if it is as good or, comparable to the one we already had written inside the business. And it would have been something from their area where they're going to be taking on responsibility.
And can I just interject? Standard
Sure.
operating procedure is what SOP stands for.
Yes.
And at BMF, we say WP, working procedures.
Mm.
It's the exact same idea.
Yeah.
Love that. Those are really good details. Do you have anything else that's like more mundane that they have to do that just helps you better understand something about them?
So with our initial onboarding, the general onboarding, there's 3 categories: preparing to join, learning how to work, getting systems set up. And preparing to join, if you want to talk about mundane, I'm just going to read them off here. By the way, all those were clickable, as you could see. So they go into each individual one. So it's read our SOP requirements, access your business email, submit your non-disclosure agreement, your vital staff member info sheet, and your working photo, access Asana, using LastPass, setting up your email signature, getting set up on our work management system. They go through some personality testing and then reviewing company core values and decision-making guidelines. That's just the preparing to join section.
So, Daniel, I'm just going to pause you for a second because we've worked with a lot of music schools, and I promise you that many, many, many of them don't have that as just the beginning, getting to know you, set yourself up phase, right?
So go ahead.
Yeah, let me just make one observation. We'll ping it right back to you. The observation isn't you're supposed to have all the same things that Daniel does at Grow. It's not that you need to have all those checklists, but do you notice how you felt as a listener when he was reading off all the steps you needed to take? When you go through your onboarding checklist as a new employee at a school or at a company like Grow, you immediately get a sense for how this school or company operates.
100%.
Right? And that to me is the main takeaway of what you just shared there. It's like, oh, if I'm going to really thrive here at Grow, I have to be someone who's very systems oriented. I have to be very comfortable being independent, being resourceful, figuring out a couple things on my own, getting through the checklist, and then coming back to my next meeting with Daniel or whomever on the team that is appropriate. So back to you, Daniel. I just wanted to make that highlight for our listeners.
Yeah, I have 2 thoughts on that. One, the consistent feedback I've gotten from team members over the years is that some people have even said, I've worked at much bigger companies than this. I have never seen something this organized.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's inappropriate to say this, but I have gotten such a sense of respect from new team members coming into this team, like just kind of shocked at how much we expect of them immediately. But the thing is we expect that from them because we train them really well. And so even with some of these new people coming on, like I've had to basically get on their case a little bit because I told them to do something and they thought they were doing it, but they weren't doing it to the degree that I was asking them to do. And so in talking about setting the expectation, like this really does set an expectation. And the other piece I would say is that people have consistently told me that it feels really good to work here because there's no ambiguity. People like accountability. What people don't like is when they're responsible but not trained for that responsibility. People don't mind accountability. In fact, they love the structure. And if they don't, then they probably aren't a good fit. And that was why one of those people didn't pass the test.
And this brings us full circle back to the exact what of the 21-day challenge.
Right. And so I'm going to get that in a second. The other thing I want to say is, and I just have to drop this here, is that Grow has a secret training that we've never really publicly like pushed really hard. It's kind of a secret training. Obviously, we have our marketing training. We have our group lessons training. Those are both like we've publicly promoted those for half a decade now. There's a secret training I keep for people who've gone through those already, although if I think a school owner can handle it, I will mention it to them. But we do have an entire training on how to scale up where I teach people how to build this onboarding system. I go through my 8-part hiring process in excruciating detail. Like that is available. So reach out. In fact, the last time I mentioned this on episode 119, we did get someone reaching out just because I kind of mentioned it in passing. And, they were asking about, getting into that because they want that for their school. So definitely reach out. Okay. So that's the second thing, but getting into the what?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's part of the what. What are you looking to hear from me, Nate?
I want a breakdown of the rest of the 3 weeks. So I get a good sense of the first week. The first week to me seems pretty straightforward. You shared it. Doesn't necessarily seem easy to get it all perfect, but I'll know if I'm a new hire, I'll know whether or not I'm checking the boxes and getting through it. And if I'm you, it sounds like I'll know whether or not that new hire is moving through it effectively because you'll get pinged as they complete these things and you'll have a follow-up meeting. So tell us about
the rest of the weeks for sure. Yeah. And just even as a comment to what you just said there, first time ever, I hired an 18-year-old this summer, summer of 2024. Passed with flying colors, was way more like, and that first week I barely heard from him. And he was primarily, I was barely working with him. He was primarily going to be working under Bethany. And I just kept hearing back from Bethany. He did this, he did this, he did this. I gave him this. He handled it just fine. Like all this sort of thing. So like even someone who might be less experienced in working in the adult world has gone through that first week and had no problem. So I just wanted to mention that. It isn't necessarily hard to do, but then again, we're screening for people we think can function well in our environment. Yeah. Okay.
Put well.
So the other 2 weeks are essentially just them working on what we hired them to do. And so we kind of just throw them into it. As I mentioned, that other team member that we just hired, the really young one who just completed his freshman year of college, we threw him into it. We threw this other team member we hired in the late spring into what we had him doing. He's now our onboarding consultant for grouplessons.com. So his entire job is kind of like a customer success, customer service, onboarding success position for grouplessons.com. That is a sponsor of this podcast. If you want to triple the margins on your piano department, just go to grouplessons.com and sign up for a free demo. So we hired him because we've been growing so rapidly that Greg and I do not have the capability of handling all of the support that our licensees need.
Can I just interject with him? Because I think
I put him through the same onboarding training and everything.
Right. And you have two different levels of employee. I can tell you don't, customer success manager versus an 18-year-old coming in, they're going to have different responsibilities, right?
100%.
Tell me, because I want to stay with the exact what of the 21-day challenge. Can you just describe 2 different types of tasks that they would have had? So the higher level customer success manager, within the 21-day challenge, what did they exhibit that showed you that they were likely going to pass? Because I know they did pass. And then with this new 18-year-old hired that is taking a kind of a lower level task, maybe sort of the consequences aren't as dire if they don't crush it, what was the type of tasks that they've taken on?
Sure.
And then what did they give you? What's the sense you got that said, yes, they're going to pass the 21-day challenge? Because I want to stay within this, get real specific for our listeners, is how they know whether or not someone is going to pass and what type of tasks to give different level employees.
Right. So in the case of Jared, who is the customer success person,
right,
his training was actually more like the entire 3 weeks, because since we're originating the role, we had a real vision for what he wanted to do, but we're basically having to build this position from scratch.
Yes.
So a lot of it entailed like a lot of meetings with me where I was just getting into the nitty gritty. A lot of it was me giving him feedback that we'd gotten. Like we have reams and reams of feedback from our licensees, and asking him to write out for me, like, what do you think we need to create to ameliorate some of these problems? You're going to be the voice of the customer. What do you hear when you read all this feedback? And just having discussions with him, him immediately starting to have one-on-one calls with our customers, our clients, and him reporting back to me doing a little spot checking because they got recorded, and just seeing how he interacted with them. That's kind of what I had him doing. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff as well, but those are just a couple examples.
Can I pause you there for a second? Because I love that example. Because our listeners can absolutely, they may not need a customer success manager right now.
Right.
But I can absolutely hear our listeners going like, oh man, imagine if this reminds me of a position we had at BMF, by the way, called Family Experience Facilitator. Imagine if we had someone on staff who would listen to our parents and all of the things that they needed and would sort of create this doc of frequently, answers to frequently asked questions so that they could be communicating with parents. I want to go back to what you just said around Jared's role. Was there something Jared did specifically around this originating of the role, reading the feedback, answering you where you were like, this person is definitely going to pass the 21-day challenge? How do you, as someone who's assessing whether or not they're going to pass, how do you even gauge that? Is it like just pure instinct? Is it intuition? What can you give our listeners so that they can be a little bit, have some help in how to assess yes versus no versus maybe?
Yeah. Okay. So it probably should be more metrics based, but there is a part of business where, for whatever reason, I do operate more under intuition, and this is definitely one of them for me. Like, I know I hammer home, like, track your metrics, do this, track every minute of the day that you're working, like all that sort of thing. Here, especially in his role, we didn't really have metrics because we're building the role from scratch. So
right.
It definitely was more of a gut feeling here.
Now, what do you wait? So, what are you looking for in your gut? Are you looking for like, this dude's awesome, I'm totally inspired, or are you looking for something else? What are you looking for in your read of intuition?
See, that's the thing. I didn't even know, but I have to tell you that. I mean, I can explain it, but I have to qualify it first.
Okay, go ahead.
The whole reason it might not be as fair with him, because the whole reason we hired him, it was like right place, right time, and we had a need. And so this was like someone I knew that both Greg and I had. He's the co-owner of Group Lessons, one of the co-owners of GroupLessons.com, had a prior business relationship with.
So he had a leg up on the 21-day challenge.
He really did, and it hasn't been without, some it hasn't been without some challenges. This particular person, like I said this earlier, but I'm going to flesh it out a little bit more here. I don't think when I hired him, when I said we write everything down here, that he really knew that I meant everything.
Totally.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's wrong or inappropriate to say this, but like I had to have a conversation like, oh, I said this last week. Did that get written down? It was like, no. I was like, well, that should have been written down. Like, I don't want to have that same conversation with 9 other customer success people that we hire over the next 10 years.
Right.
Everything that we talk about, like, especially when it comes to things you should be doing, because what he said to me was, oh, you know what? I'm really beginning to internalize that. And I could tell by the way that he said it, that it was like, I'm so happy I did. I was like, no, that's the worst thing you could have done. Internalizing it and doing what I said is the worst thing you could have done. Because now the 9 people I'm going to hire after this, I'm going to also have to hope that they internalize it too. We need to systematize this. And so, and I wouldn't say that someone would have failed the 21-day test, but I am more committed to this person. So in other words, if it had been a different person, would they fail the 21-day test if they weren't writing all this down? Maybe, maybe not. But there is like a little bit of a Wild West mentality with this particular role, because this is not a generalist. This is a specialist. And this is the first time we're building a role out in this way. So that's the first thing. Yes, that's where I was going next.
Yeah, let's move to your 18-year-old then, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So basically, the job description was, and he knew this coming in, we wanted this because Bethany has hit an upward limit of the amount of marketing management she can do for Grow and Piano Express and 7FMS. And I needed her to have more space to make even more marketing content for all 3 of those entities. Right. And so we were looking at things that she could offload. And so the job description was, we need someone that we can take basic admin, basic processes around here that Bethany's kind of doing mindlessly and throw it to another person. And we're going to do that as rapidly as we can. And so we came into this not even really having a job description other than like a very general admin job description, which, by the way, would be applicable to a music studio, like just a general admin. And so, just to say it again, we actually have the exact job description that we give in that scale training that I was talking about earlier, that secret training. That's what we used. So if you all want that, it's in my scale training. Just reach out, Daniel@growyourmusicstudio.com. Okay, having said that. So he came on, and for him, what I was looking at is like, is he going to make stupid, silly mistakes? Is he going to, not have the attention to detail needed? Is he going to, have a billion questions? Is the work going to be substandard? Is it going to be too slow? Is it going to take him too long? Is he going to take 3 hours to do something that I think he should be able to do in an hour and that maybe Bethany was doing in 45 minutes? And so basically, and by the way, I was managing through Bethany with this. I was basically saying to her, hey, this is what you should be looking for. And so after about a week and a half, I came back to her and was like, hey, how are things going with him? And she was like, oh, he's doing everything. He's doing everything so fast. He's super professional. In fact, she said it's funny. He talks like he's way older than he is. He's just very communicative. So basically, he fit right in with this culture.
So I'm going to pause. I'm going to highlight some of the criteria you said when measuring on the 21-day test, because I think the details are important. You said, number one, are they making more errors than usual? So I think you said being really messy. Number two, you said, are they taking 3x longer to do the job than expected? You don't expect them to do it as fast as Bethany.
Yep.
But if Bethany does it in 45 minutes and he comes back and do it in 3 hours, that's a red flag for you.
Yep.
Right. And then the third thing I heard you say is he communicates effectively. He works professionally with members of your team.
Yeah.
I think that last one is a real important one to kind of highlight, because oftentimes when we're the one who's so invested in this person working out, sometimes we'll be like, okay, it's cool that they don't quite know how to communicate or they didn't get right back to me. You know what I mean? But you were asking Bethany, how is it working with this person?
Yeah.
And that's a really important differentiator, because Bethany's going to give you an honest answer. She's going to be like,
100%.
actually, it was a little tough. Like, I didn't hear from him for a day. I don't know what happened to him, but he disappeared. Right. Or something like that. Yeah.
And that is actually one of the main reasons why the first person that failed the 21-day test failed. For a distributed team, communication is crucially important. And she was terrible at communication. Also, she was making some of the dumbest, I mean, I just hate to say it, but it's been 6 years. She doesn't listen to the podcast. She was making just stupid errors, just unbelievable errors. Like how could you send this to our customers with this many typos in it?
Yeah, we had, we were one of our clients we work with. Remember, she was talking about that. She was talking about a desk person coming on, and you're just like, wait, but there's a template for the response. You're sending the wrong template. That kind of thing.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think if you're listening, and then I kind of want to bring this to a close by going back to how you opened, which is giving us a few more specifics on why the two people that did not pass the 21-day test, why did they not? But before we go there, let me just highlight a couple things, which is if you're listening to this, instead of using or thinking about it in the abstract, the someday maybe I'll try this 21-day test. Instead, I would encourage our listeners to do two things. Number one, ask yourself, who is the next most important hire at your school? How could I apply some of the lessons learned that Daniel shared today to that next most important hire? That's number one. And then number two, I would ask yourself, do you have a current hire who might not have actually passed your 21-day test had you had it in place? And if you do have a current employee or staff member or admin or VA or whoever it is that you're thinking they may not have passed it, maybe honestly, this is an opportunity for you. You're like, okay, I'm going to offboard this person over the next 3 to 6 months, and I'm going to try hiring in a different way, the replacement, right? This episode is sponsored by BigMusicGames.com. As our listeners know, Brooklyn Music Factory is all about a fun, fluency-first approach to music lessons. And at the foundation of our teaching methods are rhythm, melody, harmony, and songwriting games that challenge students as young as 4 years old to train their ears and flex that musical mind. Because when you set an intention of gamifying every single lesson, you're going to find improved attendance, increased play at home, and higher student retention. So we've set up a website just for our listeners so you can start playing today. Go to bigmusicgames.com/7FMS and create your free account. Again, that's bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. And if you join today, I'm going to send you a personal invite to join our weekly teacher training call with me and Greggy Bizzle, our chief game designer. Go ahead and put play back into practice with Big Music Games. Back to you, Daniel. So in closing, I would love to look at those couple people that did not pass the 21-day test. Maybe you could give us a few more specifics and stories as to why.
Yeah. So the first one, I had Alicia, who was just an absolute rock star, as my very first really good hire. And then I hired Kirsten about 9 months later and was cross-training Kirsten to do some of the jobs Alicia did so that Alicia could be freed up to do higher level work. This has been a pattern. Like, we try to hire someone underneath so we could keep upgrading the higher level person because we're a smaller team. Turns out that was a good thing I did, because then Alicia left not long after that under good terms. So then I wanted to put someone under Kirsten because there's a vulnerability there. Because if they're basically running operations, if they leave, then that all of a sudden puts 160 hours of work a month back on me, which I can't do. No. We're leveraged. So we hired two people actually. and put them both through the 21-day test. I hired two because they both said they were fine with very part-time hours, and both seemed so good on paper that I had a hard time deciding which was, so I just hired both of them. One of them failed, and I kept the other. And the one that failed, she made a lot of like attention to detail mistakes, made silly errors, tough to communicate with. She was very defensive when I brought all this stuff up, which I couldn't have known in an interview. You know, like she was actually defending herself, and there was no defense for some of the mistakes she made. None. When you make mistakes that stupid, you just own it and say, "I'm sorry, it won't happen again." You don't defend the mistakes. Both of these people I hired were in their mid-20s at the time, I think, maybe mid to late. And the one we ended up, no, she was in her late 20s. This other one was like in his early to mid-20s. And we ended up keeping him, and he worked here like 3-4 years. And then...
any other specifics on mistakes? Like, I like what you just said there. You're holding them accountable, and you're seeing how they respond to accountability.
100%. So, that was huge. So you can take a lesson away from that. But yeah, just like typos, not following procedures that were documented very, very well, just stuff like that. In the case of the second person that we hired and then didn't retain this spring, she was honestly looked like she was going to be a dream hire. I was very excited to work with her. We had 50-something applications for this role. I narrowed it down to like a half dozen, had mini interviews with 4 of them. 2 of them didn't survive a questionnaire process. Had interviews with 4. Came down to 2 finalists, but I felt one of the finalists was too prickly. She just seemed kind of unpleasant to work with, and I just didn't want that. We have too much of a happy, fun environment around here to bring that into. The other person, very warm, very social, very easy to work with, very communicative. I love all of these things about her. She was like texting me before she was even hired, and there was, she just felt like, and then the role she was in currently that she was wanting to leave, she would be leaving on good terms, but they were ending her ability to work remotely. They wanted her in the office more, and she was unhappy about that, so she was looking for a new position. So anyway, she got through the first week, and then as we got into the second week, it basically, I wouldn't even say she failed the 21-day test. So it's just that it became evident that the role wasn't going to grow as fast as she wanted to. Like it was going to take her longer to get really familiar because some of the stuff we were asking her to do was really complex. And so there was uncertainty for her, and she was really wanting more of a job that had a lot more definition. And so it ended up not being a good fit for her. And so she just, got in touch with me and basically was like, I don't think this is going to work out. Like, I'm actually a little bit nervous because I feel like I need more definition around this. And as I said earlier, like we are a little bit more of like a Wild West in some aspects of how we operate. And so her concerns that she might not get enough hours in the upcoming months essentially ended her ability to work with us long term. Like long term, I know she would have been fine, but it was the initial couple months that she was concerned about. And I think she just, there wasn't enough definition for her. And so this wasn't even her failing in the other way. The 21-day test did what it needed to do. It gave us an opportunity to understand each other a little bit more. And she didn't like what she saw on our end, so she left.
Yeah.
But because of how we had this set up, it was a very easy breakup.
Yes.
It was not hard. It wasn't like we committed all this time and resources and like that sort of thing. And so we actually de-extricated very quickly. And that was that.
Yeah, I love that last comment, Daniel, because I remember when we were prepping for this app, I brought up a version of this that I had heard from one of my mentors who said that at his company, they implemented something where after the first month, they would look at all the new hires. This was a larger company, and they would say, we think you guys are a great fit. Values, purpose. Their training probably lasted longer to get onboarding than maybe at a Brooklyn Music Factory at a Grow. But they said, we think you're a great fit, but we only want you here if you're fully committed. So we're going to offer you, I think they offered like $1,000 or $2,000 that day, right there on the spot. Say, we'll write you a check right now to walk away and never come back. No, I was like blown away that you would pay someone to leave the job, especially in our industry where we feel like we're, working our ass off to try to hire people to attract great teachers or great staff to our music school. But it really got this idea in my head that you just shared. Like a 21-day challenge is meant to work both ways.
Yes.
And you want to ensure that the people that you're going to then invest the long-term resources in are going to be around for 3 or more years. 3 to 5 years is sort of, I think, the ideal in our industry. And that kind of leads me to my closing question, Daniel, for you, which is, what happens if you don't implement a 21-day challenge? Like, what are the consequences of not having something like this in place?
Yeah. I think that you probably, this is about setting up expectations. It's probably going to be a lot harder to let someone go when that wasn't the expectation they had coming in. There'll be an entitlement. Oh, I have the job now. It's mine. The attitude in someone, it'll be a much harder situation than saying like, oh, this is part of the hiring process. You're still not hired for 21 days. That's when you're hired. But right now, we're going to pay to train you. We're going to pay you to do some work. But it could be temporary. I hope it isn't, but it could be. With that expectation, you're going to have a very different dynamic. They're going to be eager to please. I mean, they obviously will be after as well, but they're a little more entrenched. It's that situation where it's the same thing. Like if I just said you're hired, they're still gonna have their first jobs. They're still gonna go through training. They're still going to be talking to me on Slack. They're still going to be having meetings with me. But when the expectation is, oh, I'm not hired yet, it just changes so much of their mindset, your mindset, and all that sort of thing. And so it's just easier to have flexibility when you have this. So the other thing I would say, if you don't use a 21-day hiring test or something like that, it is possible that you're going to end up hiring the wrong person, and it'll be harder to see that. So
that's happened. Yeah. And that's happened at the factory. I'm sure all of our listeners who have multi-teacher larger schools have experienced versions of this where they had a mishire, and I might just say one more thing before kicking it back to you to see what else you have to wrap this one up. But the accountability is not with them. You're the expert, you're the employer, you're the visionary, you know the purpose and values of your company. When you have a mishire, there's only one person or persons to blame, and that's you and your hiring team, right? If you implement something like the 21-day challenge, you're essentially giving you and your team enough runway to find out whether you're going to take flight together or better to just leave this sucker on the tarmac and move on, So I think that accountability is a reminder, and it's not a harsh statement. It's just, to me, it's like, that's what we signed up for when we started our own business, is we signed up for being the one who is accountable for each aspect, the success of each aspect of our business.